Are you a woman or person socialized as a woman who strives to do everything perfectly, but feels plagued with self-doubt and doesn't really know how to answer the question of who are you? If so, you may have something called Superwoman syndrome. It's actually not a syndrome, but it is a phenomenon and experience. And it can lead to things like chronic stress and fatigue, burnout, even depression or anxiety. So today, let's talk about Superwoman syndrome and what to do about it. I'm Dr. Kit Sly's life coach and licensed psychologist here to inspire perfectionists and anxious achievers to feel calm and confident while holding clear boundaries. So, what exactly is Superwoman syndrome? It happens when women or folks who are socialized as women, and that's an important piece here, I think. It happens when those folks are trying to do all the roles perfectly all at once, right? Mom, boss lady, career woman, wife, daughter, friend, athlete, uphold some standard of beauty, the list goes on. And that um, perceived burden of trying to do all those things perfectly takes a lot of energy over a long period of time. So it can lead to things like chronic stress, chronic fatigue, difficulty sleeping, headaches. As I mentioned, anxiety, depression, it can make it harder to concentrate or make decisions. And that's all these things are a result of the chronic stress of this experience of trying to just be perfect for everybody all the time. It can really make it really hard to relax and enjoy leisure time when you were once able to do that. And it causes us to neglect our personal needs and our self-care, which is oftentimes why it leads to that experience of not really know how to answer that question of who am I, because you're not spending any time with yourself. You're spending all your time doing everything for everybody else and having a hard time if you feel like you're not doing all those things perfectly. So researchers have actually looked at this syndrome and they found some interesting things that I think are really telling. What they found is that folks who experience this role, and it's not a role that we take unconsciously, it's something that we unconsciously fall into. And then we also, outside of our conscious awareness, feel this obligation to do a couple of things. One is project strength out into the world, like, no, 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 I can handle it. I can do all the things. Okay. Two is to suppress emotions. So to not, okay, that the response of like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine, when really you are pissed off, resentful, overwhelmed, whatever, what's the acronym? Fine. Effed up, insecure, neurotic, and what's the E in that one? I don't know. But, so you're suppressing your emotions as a superwoman, right? You're also feeling this obligation, the research has shown, to not feel vulnerable or to basically not depend on others because somehow if you do that, it will mean that you can't do all the rules perfectly or something like that, right? There's this obligation to succeed despite having limited resources. No, 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 I can do it. I don't need, again, the help from other people. I don't need whatever the resource is. And there's also, of course, this feeling that you can't prioritize your own self-care and that you must take care of others first, and that somehow taking care of yourself isn't going to be a good thing. So if you kind of think about those things, it's kind of interesting when a lot of people, if you Google Superwoman syndrome, you'll see a lot of things of like, okay, you've got to learn to set your boundaries and ask for help and engage in self-care. And yes, that's true and fine and dandy, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I think that one thing that doesn't get talked about as much is like, why? Why does this happen? Why is this something that folks who were socialized as women experience? Because sure, men can experience chronic stress and just high levels of stress from the pressure of having high expectation, but it's different for women. You don't hear people asking men of like, oh, you've got kids and a career. How do you do it all? Right? That is something that is different for women. And I think, part of this also lies in the fact that in very recent history, women weren't trusted from a societal perspective to be active members of the workplace. And if you think about this, it has to, there's evidence for this, right? And because of that, and I'll go into that some of the evidence, but because of that, because we weren't trusted to be active members of the workplace, there's this residual and still current sort of unconscious, sometimes conscious even, perception of, oh my gosh, oh my goodness, I've got to work extra hard to prove myself, to do the same thing that maybe a man is doing. And let me illustrate what I mean by the evidence. So the Equal Pay Act was passed in 1963, and that was a law that required men and women to be paid equally when doing the same work, which implies that they were not. And in fact, as of 2023, women were paid on average almost 22% less than men for doing the same work. And that's according to the Economics Policy Institute. So 60 years after that law was passed, our culture still has not fully shifted to say, hey, you women can do it just as well as us men, and here's the compensation to prove that we believe that. Even if you feel like, oh, we've come such a long way in that time, well, great. That law was still passed when, so for me, that was like my mom's generation, my parents' generation. So that mindset was in my mom's psyche and passed on to me, whether she did it consciously or not, right? So it's still very present. And if you need more evidence than that, it wasn't until 1974 when the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed and women were able to get their own credit cards, which is, I mean, it's crazy to think about today that in very recent history, we weren't allowed to go out and get our own line of credit. It wasn't until 1988 that women didn't need a man to co-sign on a loan for a woman-owned business. So again, even though these laws have been passed, I'm just trying to highlight how we can see from like a woman's perspective, our psyches is coming from a place of feeling like we have to prove ourselves worthy, which is exhausting, you know? And as women, we get asked all the time about, as I was saying before, like, how do you do all the things? How do you be a mom and have a career? That's really amazing that you can do that, right? How do you do it? And the implication from that question is that there's a belief in our society that we can't do it all, right? So it's surprising when we can do it. So what do we do about that? What's the solution? First, I think that understanding this cultural context I just described goes a long way in helping folks who are socialized as women let go of some of the unhealthy expectations we have for ourselves. Because when we understand that these expectations are actually not our own, that they are thoughts that we have perhaps unconsciously adopted from society, when we understand this, we can recognize that the thoughts that we have about, oh, I'm not good enough, I've got to work extra hard to prove it, are not true. And we can also recognize that those thoughts perhaps are not helpful. So, so that goes a long way. And then we can also find, once we recognize that, we can find some more helpful thoughts instead. These are thoughts like giving yourself permission to set boundaries, permission to be in touch with your feelings, and to prioritize yourself. So I'll give you some examples of what I'm talking about. Write these down, practice saying them, just practice them, even if they feel weird. So they can be things like, I am allowed to say no. I can care about people in my life without taking care of everyone. I work to understand how I am feeling and why. And in fact, I'm noticing that today I'm feeling fill in the blank and practice checking in with your feelings. And one more, if I don't take care of myself first, I won't have the energy to do other important things. Okay. So we can let go of these unhelpful thoughts, right? Number one, we can replace them with help thoughts that actually serve us. Third, we can develop assertive communication. And what do I mean by that? This is not aggressive or passive communication. I think a lot of us women fall into that passive or sometimes passive aggressive style because we are afraid to speak up. So we hedge, we use hedging language. So an assertive communicator says what they mean in direct language. It's sort of like that Goldilocks zone. So an example would be like an assertive would be, hey, can you please help me with the dishes? Thanks. Aggressive would be, you never help me with the dishes. Passive would be, oh, sorry to bother you. You know what? It'd be nice if I can get a little help doing the dishes in the kitchen, but I know I could also do it on my own if you're too busy. It's passive because if you really want help with the dishes, you need to say so. Otherwise, you're going to resent the other person for not complying with your quote unquote request when in fact it wasn't really a request. You are giving full permission to say no with that passive communication style. Passive aggressive would be like, oh, fine, I'll just do it myself. So you can kind of see there's not even a request there. It's sort of, and there's not even mention of what you're really needing. You're not implying or you're not saying, hey, I need this help in any way, but so it's passive in that regard, but it's aggressive because you're just saying, okay, fine, I'll just do it myself. So assertive communication. I could go on and on about that one as well, but I just want to highlight some examples for that one. Fourth thing that we can do is develop self-compassion. Recognizing that it is okay to make mistakes. If you make mistake, it doesn't mean that you can't be all of those things. It means you're human. And the way that you develop self-compassion, I talk about this in so many of my other videos, but you literally have to develop a different language with yourself, a kind language with yourself when you make a mistake. And then finally, the thing that you can do is to let go of perfectionism. Just because you can do it all doesn't mean that that's a good idea, folks. Stop trying to prove to yourself and others, and instead prove to yourself that you can be successful even when you are less than perfect. And I will make a video on perfectionism for more on this. So I hope you found this helpful today. And please be kind to yourself. Remember that you don't have to do it all and that you have value in this world, even just by whatever it is that you're doing. Thank you so much for everything that you do for yourself and for others. And please prioritize yourself. Know that it's okay to fill your cup before, so that you have something to fill other cups with. Okay. Until next time, take good care. Bye.